this gives you an overview of the area in which the project will be impacting. This isn't specific to any one type of utility. This is all of the utilities, any and all of the utilities that we may be impacting within the project area. And so at the beginning of the presentation in March, we showed you this graphic, and we're just showing you it again, just to remind you on kind of what is currently out in your neighborhood for water, sewer, and or drainage. So if you look at the different areas on the map that are highlighted, it shows the different utilities that you have within your neighborhood and how those, as we start to talk about the different utilities, we'll talk about how some of those utilities may be impacted. With that, Joe?
Thanks, Nicole. This slide essentially kind of sums up what Nicole just showed you on the previous slide, the different types of utilities. And these are images that we have from other projects, but just, give you a kind of a broad understanding that, there will be excavation. Obviously, the utilities are buried in the neighborhood. There'll be some water main improvements, new hydrants and valves. There'll be some drainage improvements with new drainage structures and some new sections of drainage pipe. There'll be new, water main, new sewer as well, new gravity sewer, and some new manholes. And then ultimately, and I think what most people come to appreciate the most at the end of the project is when the project gets buttoned up and there's some new paving and curbing in some places. Some walkway striping, and some sidewalk. So this project has all of those elements to some degree. And, those of you in the neighborhood who've been around other construction projects, either in Exeter or elsewhere, understand when you're digging utilities, it's a bit disruptive. But the bottom line is it's going to improve the functioning and efficiency of the water system, the sewer system, and drainage system in Exeter. Okay. And this is just a blow up of the neighborhood, the footprint, the aerial view of the neighborhood. And we have a few slides like this that are really just kind of summary slides to give you an idea of the extent of the utility that's going to be replaced, the extent throughout the neighborhood. And in this case, virtually all the water mains that were identified originally in the project CIP are going to be replaced on this project. So by street name, wherever you live in the neighborhood, look at your street, look at your location, and you can see which utility or utilities might be replaced, next to your property. Okay, Nicole? The sewer map has a little bit less sewer replacement than what you saw previously on the water system map. And that's largely because some of the sewers have been replaced in the neighborhood through other projects over the years. When we got resource information from the town and also got some field information, verified some field information, there are some sections of sewers in the neighborhood that are PVC pipe, which is what we would use currently. And those are in good shape, so those won't need to be replaced. But the areas in green here that you see will get new gravity sewers installed. And that's because most of what's out there now in these areas are older clay pipes, and they have some known deficiencies, cracks, and leaking joints that allow excess water into the system. Okay, Nicole? Likewise, the storm drainage system, that has some areas where there'll be some trunk line replacement, which are also clay pipe. And in need of replacement. And then in some areas, so you see in the kind of the orange, or I think as Steve described, the creamsicle, if those of you know what a creamsicle is, that color is where there's going to be some replacements of main lines and laterals and structures. And then in the magenta, or the pink color there, that's mainly catch basins. And then the lateral drain line that connects those to the main trunk line. And most of those are, the intent here with the catch basin replacement in particular, is to improve water quality in the stormwater. A lot of the existing catch basins are only a couple of feet deep. They don't have what we call a sump, which is a deeper section of the structure below the pipes in and out. That helps capture sediment which improves stormwater quality. And the town of Exeter is making a concerted effort to meet their municipal stormwater permit with EPA and the water quality that the stormwater that's collected and discharged to the receiving streams, that's an improved stormwater condition. And there's also now a very recent Great Bay total nitrogen permit that the town of Exeter is also complying with. And these types of improvements by replacing basins that have sediment capture and can capture solids and some nutrients, that helps to improve stormwater quality that ultimately gets discharged to the receiving waters. So again, compared to the water system map, for example, it's not 100% of the drain system that needs to be replaced, but through the investigation of the work, the condition of what's out there, this is what we determined should be replaced. Next slide. And then one of the early comments we had from the meeting last March, was concern over how the project would be left, the condition of the paving. And because there are so many utilities to be replaced and multiple utilities on many streets, it made the most sense to repave the neighborhood. And in this case, we looked at pavement widths in different areas. Some pavement widths are very narrow. Some streets are narrower than others. Some sections are really wide. But we're gonna repave the neighborhood with a 24-foot wide complete overlay. And that's going to be a binder course pavement. And that just means that's the first thick layer of pavement that goes down. And that's good to do that in these utility projects and let the project sit through a winter period in case there's any settlement and there's any repairs that need to be made before a final paving. The town will handle the final paving as part of a different project, as part of their annual pavement program. And there is some sidewalk to be replaced there too. Sorry, Nicole, on that slide. And that will connect sidewalk from Salem and Oak to Park Street. And many of you in the neighborhood might have seen Hoyle Tanner staff and other different contractors, vendors out there doing work in the neighborhood over the last year. We did some smoke testing, which the town DPW helped out with. They were great to provide the smoke machine and the staff to help with that. And that's really used in dry weather conditions. We try to locate, any cross connections there. The closed circuit television, we did some of that work as well. That's used to observe the interior conditions of sewers, storm drains, and some of the sewer services. We couldn't get into all of them, but we're able to get into many of them. And then you might have seen a drilling rig out in the neighborhood. And that was to do some borings and probes. And we do that to assess the subsurface condition. What are we in for? What's the contractor in for when they dig to put in utilities, maybe in new locations or crossing utilities? And in general, what we found with the smoke testing, there were several cross connections to the storm drain system that were found. Some were resolved, others will be resolved as part of this project. The CCTV work, the closed circuit TV work, where they put a tractor camera into the sewer and they can provide a video and links down the pipe run of where they find defects. We did find, obviously, several sections of the clay pipe that had offset joints and cracks, but also some of the building sewer services were found to be deficient. Some were blocked. We couldn't get the camera up into those. Others we did find, old clay pipe services that were in disrepair. And on the borings and probes, and we did a limited number. It's an expensive process, and you get generally the area is understood to be pretty contiguous with the subsurface information. We did a limited number of borings and probes, but we found that a lot of the soil material should be relatively competent and relatively easy digging for the contractor. We generally look for areas where there might be ledge or really high groundwater. The groundwater condition has been low for the last couple of years. We've been in drought conditions now for almost 2 years. So we're not really sure, unless we get a very wet year this year, that will change anything. But in general, the digging should be relatively straightforward, which is also good considering this is a neighborhood that has quite a few homes in a relatively small area. Not having to drill and blast and hammer ledge is going to be a kind of a cleaner construction process and less disruptive. So, next slide, please. One of the things we did find from the closed circuit TV work was looking at the building services. As many as we could locate and get the camera up, we did do that. And as part of the project, the main project, the building services for both water and sewer will be replaced from the water main or sewer main to the edge of the right-of-way. For the water, that includes a water shutoff, and for the sewer, that includes a cleanout. The town is exploring, some form of assistance to replace some of the sewer laterals beyond the right-of-way that were observed to be in poor condition. And I'll let Jen and Paul speak to that if they want to now or later. But that's something that Exeter and other communities have looked into as a means to help homeowners replace poor sections at the time that the project is done. There will be no water service replacement on private property, but one of the things that the town is obligated to do, EPA will have a new lead and copper initiative, particularly lead service pipes. And we will be noting through our resident observer on the project, as well as town staff, we will be noting what type and condition, type of material and condition the water services are when the connections to the new sections are made on the project. And then for properties that were identified previously as having sump pumps, if there is an opportunity, if there's a readily accessible drain adjacent to the property, we will look to provide a relief drain so that the sump pump, if the sump pump now discharges to the sewer, the town is motivated to get that discharge out of the sewer and put it in the storm drain. And that will be a case-by-case basis. And as we get into the construction of the project, we'll look for those opportunities to do that. Jen, Paul, any comments on this particular slide in the content on services?
I think that's good for now.
Okay.
We'll have more discussion on that part later.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And on the drainage system, there is closed drainage on a number of the roads. I think maybe Warren Street might be the only street without any closed drainage. And there are some sections of other streets that don't have closed drainage, some segments. But by and large, there is a closed drainage system in the neighborhood. And as I mentioned earlier, some of the catch basins are really small. They have an older style inlet to the catch basin that's difficult to clean and maintain. So for this project, we've tallied up, I think, about 43 new catch basins. As we get into construction and connect up to all the pipes, we may find, one or two more that need to be replaced. These catch basins, though, the new structures, as I mentioned earlier, they will have a sump. So the sump is basically where pipes come in and out of the structure. Right now, there is no sump. The pipes come in and out, and the bottom of the structure is right at the bottom of the pipe. These new drainage structures and catch basins will have a section below the pipe that's there to collect sediment. And trapping sediment generally traps a lot of contaminants that could get into the receiving water. So it's good. It's a measurable and quantifiable element of the project that the town of Exeter going forward, they can maintain these catch basins by vacuuming out the sediment from the sump, and they can document that. And the town gets credit for that, for complying with the stormwater permit and with the Great Bay total nitrogen permit. So it's a good thing for the town. It's a good thing for the community. It's cleaning up the stormwater, but it also is quantifiable and measurable, and the town is able to document that annual maintenance and how much material they remove each time, and that's material that doesn't get put into the waterway. So improving the grates, bringing them up to current standards. Improves the flow into the drainage grate. Part of the repaving in the neighborhood also looked at. We found a lot of existing catch basins that were largely ineffective because of how they were positioned and the width of pavement and how the road was graded. So the redesign of all of this is intended to improve the efficiency of the drainage. And then we also mentioned on that earlier slide where we showed you the map of some segments of storm drain being replaced completely, others being lined. The replace and lining rather than replacing by open excavation, but lining existing pipe, it's less disruptive in those areas. And we do have some areas where the relining is going to be helpful because either the utilities are layered and difficult to get to, or the utilities are deep. The stormwater utilities are deep. So particularly, I think Oak and Salem, there's some relining that will be done that will simplify and streamline the process. One of the things that the town is also doing, we have 2 water quality treatment tanks that will be installed on the property, on the project. One is on Park Street, and I think the other one is over, if I don't recall correctly, Jen, correct me, I think that's over on the Oak Salem area of the project. But that's intended to improve stormwater quality as well, where the stormwater can collect in the tank, and there's a sand filter that traps solids and and any contaminants, and then the clean or cleaner stormwater is allowed to discharge from the tank, and then periodically that tank is pumped out. The materials that accumulate on top of the sediment are removed, and again that just improves stormwater quality. It helps the town to comply with the permits that they are required to comply with, and in general just improves the waterway, the quality of the discharge of the waterway. So it's a great step for the town to take. And again, it's one of those quantifiable, measurable steps that the town, as they maintain it, they can document the maintenance and see just how effective it is. And also perhaps apply this to future projects, looking at all these different features that get put in and how the town can maintain and keep track of which ones are more effective than others. That just helps the town make good decisions going forward as well. Next slide. On the pavement restoration and sidewalks, again, I mentioned all of the areas disturbed from the utility work will get repaved. The binder paving will happen on the neighborhood streets where there are utilities that extend out into Park Street, for example. Those areas will get the binder and the wearing course, the top coat of pavement to smooth out Park Street. So anywhere there's utilities extending into a street that's not getting new utilities, that will get finished paving. But the neighborhood will get this binder paving, which is about a 2.5 inch thick layer of paving. It's perfectly good, serviceable, drivable pavement, but it also is a really nice finish to allow the project to settle over 4 seasons basically, and then any shimming can be done before final wearing course. This slide we mentioned the milling. I'm not sure if people are familiar with that, but basically we want to take advantage of the paving that's out there and the gravel materials below by reclaiming or grinding all that up. That material will be set aside and reused as a base for the new paving. The final paving will be a full width, course of paving, 24 feet wide throughout the neighborhood. And we should also mention that on the paving side, there are, for Oak and Salem Street, any utility disruption there, installation, those 2 streets, because of the traffic volume, will get a temporary pavement every Friday for weekend traffic. The rest of the project, where we've put into the contract documents for bidding that the contractor is allowed to disrupt up to 500 feet of roadway at any one time. And those areas will need to be resurfaced before they move at least with temporary, before they move to the next segment of the project. And the intent here is to not disrupt the entire neighborhood by having everything down to gravel and excavated for months on end. On the sidewalk, the new sidewalk, that will be on Oak and Salem Street, and that's intended to connect. That starts at the edge of the railroad right of way on Salem Street. This project, we don't have the authority to cross the railroad right of way, so that will start on the neighborhood side of the railroad right of way. And that sidewalk will extend down Salem and Oak and connect to the sidewalk that's already on Park Street. And the decision was made there. A lot of thought went into the right of way, the width of the roadways, and where the higher volume, pedestrian traffic areas are. And it was felt that these two streets in particular to connect to Park would afford the neighborhood an opportunity to get out to Oak or Salem and be able to make it to Park Street and cross. And from that point, there's many sidewalks and directions that pedestrians can go. So that will be an asphalt sidewalk. There'll be a sloped granite curb, and there'll be no grass strip. There just wasn't enough width in the right of way to provide that. But it will be an improvement for pedestrian safety, particularly on Oak and Salem, where there's a higher traffic volume. There will be ADA curb ramps at the intersection of roadways, and there'll be some markings across the pavement as well, so that automobile drivers know to stop for crossing pedestrians. Next slide. This summary table is just a lot of data here, but really the takeaway here is this is a pretty significant project for the town. It absolutely is for the neighborhood as well. There's a lot of water main and sewer and drainage pipe to be replaced, so that requires excavation. Requires, it's going to be disruptive. No lie there on the construction. Construction is always disruptive. But it's a significant project, and that's, the cost of the project reflects that. This is a lot of work to do in a pretty small area. A lot of services. I think there's about 95 homes in the project area, so there's going to be a lot of extra work, not just the main line work, but there's going to be a lot of side and lateral work, new cleanouts, new shutoffs to be put in, and a fair amount of sidewalk and a lot of pavement to be done. So it's a big project. Next slide, please. So where are we? We met last year in March, right before everything shut down, and we were really just getting started. We had just obtained documents and had a few meetings with the town engineering and public works staff to get a better understanding of what was out there on the project site. But we're now at the point where we have project documents that are ready for bidding. I'm going to say a summer bid period. We're heading into warmer weather now. My mind, summer starts at Memorial Day, and we're almost there. We anticipate construction to start, I'd say July, August, probably August is with more certainty this year. There will be a winter shutdown for the project. That's anticipated because it's, like we showed on the previous slide, there's a lot of work to be done. It's not to say a contractor might not bring in multiple crews, to make greater progress, faster progress, but we don't know that today. So we anticipate a winter shutdown with project completion next year. We will note too that, the contractor would be required before a winter shutdown to pave and clean up the neighborhood, clean up the site, construction site, so that it's, passable, plowable, safe for the winter. Next slide, please. And one of the elements too, as we head forward toward bidding, once the bidding is done and we have an apparent low bidder and a recommending to award to a contractor, once we have a contractor on board, we will have a pre-construction meeting, and that will be open it's a public meeting, be open to this neighborhood group as well as others in town. And that's where we'll cover what the contractor's schedule is, how they are going to approach the project. Is it going to be one crew, two crews? Where might they start the project? They'll also, within the contract documents, we have requirements for them to provide a traffic control plan. We have a tree protection plan requirement as well. There were a number of people in the neighborhood who pointed out, that there are some very old trees that they would like preserved. We took that to heart. We did have an arborist go out and walk the site with us. We have identified on the plans very specific trees to be protected, but with the arborist, we looked at the entire project. So the contractor will have to have an arborist develop a tree protection plan and have that arborist on call when they get to certain areas, where there's sensitive trees. For example, I think there's a large elm tree on the project, and we've shown new utilities to go as far from that tree as possible, but the arborist will still be communicating with the contractor, and that will be part of the tree protection plan on what steps to take to do the best we can to preserve that tree. There will also be a temporary water service plan during construction, because we are disrupting so many utilities on each segment of road in the neighborhood. There will be temporary water service and temporary sewer service, sewer connections or bypass pumping set up by the contractor. And those will be, that's a temporary water plan is going to be submitted by the contractor. It's going to have to meet, state requirements and water quality requirements, so it'll be safe for drinking. But it's necessary. There's very hard to get around doing all these utilities and not disrupting any service. So those are kind of the key points. There'll be many other things that are covered in the pre-construction meeting. But again, the public is welcome to attend that meeting and hear firsthand from the contractor, from our group managing the construction, as well as from town staff, and offer, comments as well at that time. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned earlier, the construction is disruptive. There will be the temporary water and sewer services. I've had projects where contractors have put a temporary water service on the entire project so that any digging they do, they don't disrupt service. I've had other contractors who've done them in segments on the project. We'll leave that to the contractor's discretion when they submit the plan, and we'll evaluate that with the town to make sure it's going to be effective for all of you in the neighborhood. Access to driveways, when they are digging right out in front of your driveway, that is going to block your driveway. We will provide advance notice to each of you when the project is going to pass by the front of your property, so that you don't get blocked in for that day or 2 days, likely just a day. In general, the construction progresses pretty quickly through an area, particularly where we didn't identify a lot of ledge with the borings and probes. So we expect those blockages to be minimal, but we also will require the contractor to have an up-to-date schedule so that we can notify people on a daily basis when we might be passing in front of their house. The requirement in the project as well is to maintain one-lane access on all roads in the neighborhood. And we put here as much as possible. There are some sections of roadway that are very, very narrow. And it may be the case in a few instances where a segment of roadway is not passable, but the way the neighborhood is laid out, there are multiple ways to get around, fortunately. So to the extent that we can, as much as possible, we'll maintain one-lane access, but I can think of a couple areas that might be tricky. Walnut Street is one. There's a section there that's very narrow. The road's about 21 feet wide, and by the time they excavate for sewer, it may be difficult to get through either side there. As I mentioned earlier, our winter shutdown is planned. There will be paving done so that the neighborhood won't be left with gravel roads. And I say that will at least be temporary. It'll probably be a winter binder that they put down, unless they get to finishing up areas that they know they won't go back to, in which case that should be the permanent binder put down. But that's a requirement of the project as well. Expect it's going to be noisy at times, dusty at times, disruptive at times. Any excavation project, particularly with 3 utilities to be replaced, is going to be challenging. We ask for your patience, but we also ask for your input and feedback throughout the project, and we'll do our best to make it a good project for everybody. I'm looking forward to it. Next slide, please. And as Nicole mentioned, these are ways to communicate with the group. And this, if there's Q&A tonight, questions, we'll be happy to answer them tonight, but also after tonight's meeting, if thoughts come to you that you want to share, please reach out.
You did. Wasn't that wonderful?
All right. Well, thank you, Joe and Nicole, for all of that. I'm going to ask IT, Natasha, do you see any hands raised, or is it, oh, there is a hand going up now. I'm going to start with the two questions in the Q&A for now, and then I'll go to Sally with her hand raised. So the first question was from Eileen Flockhart, the tree committee chair, asking about the arborist, which Joe touched on a little bit already, that yes, we have been in touch with them, with an arborist, and the contractor is required to submit a plan for that. There are no plans to cut any trees right now completely. There will be some limbing and trimming ahead of the project, partly because the equipment that we use needs to raise up the arm. So rather than get tangled and rip down a branch, we would go through and cut things that rather than damage them. And there will probably be some root trimming that the arborist has to do in certain areas. But one of the things that we did consider and change in the design was that drainage pipe lining that Joe mentioned on Oak and Salem Street. Not only is it a deep pipe, so it would be a costly excavation, but we found that we have the ability to line that, and we won't be disturbing the area in front of that large elm tree. So that's even less disturbance that that's going to have to deal with. So we did address that a little bit. So hopefully that answers your question. Oh, and the tree warden, yes, Jay is on the meeting now, and when we have the arborist report submitted, he'll be reviewing that as well. The next question is from Ian Smith. If the town finds that any private connections need repair, will homeowners have opportunity to fix these while the streets are open? Is the awarded contractor able to fix while they are there if the homeowner pays for it? So there's two parts to that. The project already includes replacing the sewer services from the main to the property line. So, yes, those services will be replaced while the streets are open, and that's paid for as part of this project. As for the rest of the service that goes from the property line to the home, that is something that we're working out the details of now to see if there's the potential for cost sharing with the town through this project to assist homeowners with getting that work done. So we would try to include that as a item in the contract for the contractor to be working on. If for some reason that doesn't happen, we can ask the contractor if they would be interested in doing work on private property. Some of them I've worked with have no problem doing that. Others say they don't want the liability, or they just are too busy booked with other projects that they can't do smaller stuff. So that is something we have to work out the details on, but we will definitely get back to you guys on how that shakes out. All right. So Sally Ward has her hand up. Natasha, you could unmute her, please.
I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
So Sally Ward, 72 Park Street. And I have several questions about the Park Street aspect of the project. Okay. I'll just tell you what all the questions, and then you can answer them serially. So the first is, my understanding from the presentation is that one segment of Park Street, which is on the short segment of Park Street, the plan is water replacement, but not sewer. And I want to make sure that that's correct. And number two, I notice most of Park Street is not being affected, and I want to know when the utilities along that major part of Park Street were dealt with. So are those up to snuff? Do we have accurate or up to standard water and sewer along that major part of Park Street? And that's why it's not included in this project. And number 3, I noticed that there's no sidewalk plan for that long segment of Park Street or the short segment of Park Street. And you may know that there is a sidewalk on the northern side of Park Street that's in pretty bad shape. And there's no sidewalk on the short segment of Park Street that hugs the Park Street Common. And I wondered what the thinking was about improving those sidewalks or adding a sidewalk on that short segment of Park Street. And my final question is just unique to my house, so I can take this answer offline. But my house is right at the point where the project looks like it's going to end, and I want to know if the water line to my house is going to be included in this project. And as I say, I'm at 72, and it's right after the split of Park Street. So those are my 4 questions.
Okay. All right. So start with the short side of Park Street, the south side. That you are correct. It is going to be water. There is storm drainage being replaced, but the sewer did not need to be replaced. That is a newer PVC pipe that was done. I say newer, but probably 20, 30 years ago, but the lifespan of these things are much longer than that. So it was evaluated and did not need to be replaced at this time. And the same thing goes for the sewer on the longer stretch of Park Street as well. The water on Park Street, I will have to check on that and get back to you. I don't recall off the top of my head what condition that is or what era that is from. But that kind of ties into the next question about the sidewalks is, yes, those sidewalks definitely need improvement, and it's tough to draw the line of where the project limits are going to be when we're evaluating and developing these projects. We all tend to have what we call scope creep, where we're like, oh, let's just go another block over. And we try to do projects in slightly smaller, more manageable chunks. So it's not that sidewalk is never going to get done. It's just, it had started with more of the Salem Street neighborhood, and then we had found Warren Ave neighborhood needed work. And there's a section of Park Street where the water main is severely undersized. So we tried to keep it as limited as possible to manage the cost. But it's definitely on the list for something in the future to look at the sidewalks there. And I am glad people bring up the areas that they're concerned about so that we can make sure that we're including them in the CIP projects that we develop. As for your particular water service, I don't have the design plans in front of me right now to say that, but if your water service comes off of Park Street, then it's not getting replaced. If it comes off the side street, then it would be. So if it came off of Locust or Warren, and again, I don't have the map in front of me, so I'm not picturing which house yours is. I don't have the numbers down pat yet. I will before the end of this project for sure. So I will check on that one and get back to you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. So it looks like John Merkel has his hand up. John, did you have a question or no? Okay, hand went down. Oh, hands back up. Natasha, could you unmute John Merkel, please? John, can you unmute yourself? You should be able to now.
Okay.
There you are.
I would like to see the sidewalks throughout the neighborhood continued through the neighborhood.
Through all of the streets, which
Yes.
can you? Okay. I don't think we have enough space to really put all of that in there. We did look at areas that had existing sidewalks that were somewhat in the right of way, somewhat on private property, but determined that the best bang for our buck with this project is to get the sidewalks up Oak and Salem as the main thoroughfare, to call it. But that in itself did add a significant cost with having to do curb and drainage. So I don't think that there is enough space to add the drainage that we would need with all of the other utilities that are happening on these narrow streets and have curb and have sidewalk. So unfortunately, I don't think we could include that in this project right now.
I think you need to try to do that. This is a very close-knit neighborhood, and it is a growing community, young children. I think you have to really look at that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, well, seeing no other questions, I guess we can wrap up for the night. I want to thank everybody for taking your time to be with us and listen to our presentation. If you think of any questions afterwards, we have Doug Flockhart raising their hand. Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Eileen.
Okay. I was just wondering, when will the pre-construction public meeting be likely to be held? And how can we get some more word out to folks? We had, our 2-day postcard, but we'd like to get a little bit more lead time so that folks who are going to be affected will know a little bit more. This was very good. I mean, this was a lot of good information.
Yeah, so when we go through bidding and we've selected the contractor, probably a couple weeks before they're actually going to be starting the work, we'll have another public meeting similar to this forum. And the contractor and the engineer and the engineer's representative will be on site. We'll all be attending, so you'll get to see who everyone is. So if you have questions during construction, you would know who to find on the site to ask questions. And I will definitely do a few days longer of the notice, and I'll even try to get the date right this time.
That would be cute. That would be cute. But there are a lot of there are a lot of neighborhood groups that would be happy to spread the word too. So
okay,
feel free to do that. Give us some heads up. We can help you out.
I appreciate you volunteering. All right, thank you, Eileen.
Sure.
All right, is there anybody else? We'll give it a second to find the raise hand button. Okay. Well, thank you all again. I really appreciate it. We got some good questions, some good feedback again, as always. This neighborhood is great. Everyone is involved and engaged in the process. So that's always good. I want people to know what's going on before it happens. So thank you again for for being involved, and we will be in touch with more information about the next meeting with a little bit more lead time.